Are you looking to supercharge your React animations on hover? With your cursor? Well, you're in the right place, because in this video, we're going to learn how to use the useLottieInteractivity hook from Lottie-react to control Lottie animations, just like the ones you're seeing on the screen. Now, if you're new here, welcome to the channel. I'm Gregg Fine, and here at the Code Creative, we look at all things related to the creative side of coding, including animation, web audio, CSS techniques, JavaScript, and much more. If that sounds intriguing, be sure to subscribe. So in my last video on this channel, I showed how to work with these hooks when you want to control the animation via the scroll bar. So I'm not going to go as deeply into the initial setup in this video, although I'll link to that video here if you want to reference it. But essentially you need to get a React application up and running. You can do so with Vite like I did. And then I've just created a component called lottie.jsx, and that's where we're going to be importing the hooks as well as our animation and writing the Lottie interactivity code. And in terms of packages for this project, you're going to want to install lottie-react. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. You're going to also need to get a Lottie animation. Fortunately, there's a lot of cool free ones out there that you can get. Here's a site called Lottie Files, and when you find one that you want to use, you can click on it, and you can go to download. And for now, you can download the very first option, Lottie.json. Once you've got your JSON file, in the source directory, in the assets folder, you can make a folder called Lotties and put your JSON file in there. So in our Lottie component, we need to get reference to the actual JSON file that holds the Lottie animation, and you can see I'm importing that here on line 2. And we're also going to use the useLottie hook to set any kind of playback settings as well as styles. So let's take a look at that a little bit deeper. Here on line 15, we're using the useLottie hook, and you can see that we're passing in two objects. We've got options and style. Let's look at options first. In the options object, we're setting the animation data property to be the path to that Lottie.json file. And at the moment I've set autoplay to false. We're going to come back to that in just a second. For the style, these are just regular CSS styles. So here we have a height of 800 pixels and a border of solid, and that's for the container, as you can see here, just so we can see the boundaries of our Lottie animation. All right, so that all gets passed in here to the useLottie hook, options and style. Now before we go any further, let's set autoplay to be true so that we can see how our Lottie animation plays out. Alright, so that's just so you can get an idea of the full playback of the animation. But we want to keep autoplay false because we want the animation to play back when we hover over it with our cursor. So let's see how we do that right now. Here I'm highlighting the useLottieInteractivity hook. You can see that we're passing it an options object. And the first thing inside of that object is going to be that Lottie object that we got from the useLottie hook. And now here's the important part. We're setting our mode to cursor. In the previous video I did on Lottie-react, we were working with scroll to control the animation with the scroll position, but we're looking at cursor mode in this video. So now is where the real fun starts, because we're going to take a look at this actions array. And in this array, we can define an action or a series of actions that we want to occur as we hover our mouse over different positions or areas of the animation's container. At the moment, we're just defining a single action, which is this object here. And you can see it has position, type, and frames properties. And we're going to dive into these to see what kind of superpowers they give us. So first of all, we're defining the type as seek. And that just means that when we hover over the animation with the cursor, the animation frames are going to start playing in sync with the cursor position. Now for this frames array, this here is defining the start and ending frame of the animation. So at the moment, we're starting on 0, which is the first frame, and we're ending at 120, which is the very last frame. And the reason I know it's 120 is because when I went and actually got my Lottie animation, on the bottom here I could see that the total frames is 120. So essentially an animation is made up of a series of frames. You could think of them as a series of still images that gets played back sort of as a flipbook, and it gets played back fast enough that it deceives our eyes into thinking that it's a smooth animation. So let's move on to the position property, and here we're creating an object, and inside of it we're passing it an X and a Y property. And these are going to define where on the X or the Y axis the cursor will be able to control the animation. So check it out. For the x-axis and for the y-axis, we're given a normalized range from 0 to 1. So in other words, the x-axis is going to go from this left corner to the right corner of the container, with the leftmost corner being at 0 and the rightmost corner being at 1. And then we can define percentages within that. So for example, if we wanted 50%, which would be about here in the middle, we'd do 0.5. And then on the y-axis, we've got 0 starting at the top of the container here, and 1 being at the bottom of the container. And again, we can work with percentages to go somewhere in the middle. So here right now, we're defining the x-axis from 0 to 1, and the y-axis from 0 to 1, meaning that we've got the full span of the container for the cursor hover to affect the animation. So let's check that out. You can see that as I bring my mouse cursor down into the container area, the animation starts to play out. And I'm moving both along the x and the y axis, so it's continuing to its final frame by the time we get down here. Alright, so now it's experiment time. Let's try adjusting the frames first. Let's say that instead of starting on the very first frame, we're going to start somewhere in the middle. We're going to do the 60th frame, and I'm just going to go 30 frames to the 90th frame. For the position, let's say now that rather than having the full range of 0 to 1, let's just go from 0 to 0.5. So now if we hover over, you can see right away that the animation has started from a different place. It started from the 60th frame. And then as I move the cursor to the right, well, you can see once it gets past this halfway point, well, the animation is no longer playing. So if you remember, I told you a bit earlier that the actions array can be an action or a series of actions. So now let's add another action after this first one. So first of all, I'm going to copy the first object and I'm going to paste it. So now we have 2. And for the first position, I'm going to set it back to the full range. So x-axis 0 to 1, y-axis 0 to 1. And the frames, I'm going to set that back as well so it plays the full range of the animation, 0 to 120. So now, check it out, this second action object, we can do something different here. What I want to do is, when I move my cursor to be outside of the boundaries of the container, I want the animation to loop just a certain portion of it, just when those coins are going up in the air. So for that, we need to change the position values. What we can do is, for the x-axis, we can give that a value of -1, and for the y-axis, we can also give that a value of -1. Basically what that's saying is, if the cursor goes outside of the boundaries on the x or the y-axis, well, do whatever action we're going to define here. And what we're going to do is we're going to set the type to be type loop. And we're going to leave frames 60 to 90. So basically, when the cursor moves outside of the boundaries of the container, we're just going to loop from frames 60 to 90. So let's save and let's check out how this is working. So first of all, when we hover over, we get our normal seeking animation. But then check it out. Let's move the cursor outside of the boundary, and we see that loop of those coins flipping. So that's one thing you can do by chaining action objects. One thing you can probably see at the moment is that regardless of whether I'm moving the cursor horizontally or vertically, the animation is sort of playing at the same speed. But since those coins are moving up and down, I think it might be nice to have the vertical scroll be a little bit more forceful than the horizontal scroll. So take a look at this example. For this one, let's get rid of that second action object, and what we want to focus in on is the position property. So since we want the vertical motion of the cursor to really affect the animation mostly, we're going to leave y to a range of 0 to 1, or the full range. But here's a little trick that we can do. In the X array, we can set these to values outside of the boundaries of the container. So let's do -10 to 10. All right, and now when I go into the animation, I've got my vertical cursor movement, and you can see that the coins are moving up and down nice and swiftly. But if I move the cursor horizontally, well, I'm getting much less of a motion. So the feeling here is that the vertical movement of the cursor is really what's affecting the animation mostly. If you're interested in learning how to bring your web pages to life with cool animations, GSAP, and scrollytelling techniques, check out my course, Scrollytelling 101. Since I launched the course, the response has been amazing, with students commenting on the wealth of web dev tips and tricks included in the lessons. I'm going to leave a link down below for you, and you can start by checking out some of the free preview videos there. I think you're going to love it.